Let's talk the club. One more thing, like, subscribe, and share. Come on, let's talk the club. Woo!
Hey, good evening, everybody. How are you all doing? It's already another. Can you believe the week is just moving on so quickly? And I'm just delighted to have you all here with me. I'm just thankful to see another Thursday where we get to spend these 1,800 seconds together. And just in case you're stopping by for the first time or haven't been here for a while and you may have forgotten, what is that guy talking about? What's going on? What are all these conversations? What is this Let's Talk to Cutler YouTube channel all about? I just want to remind you that this channel is about inspiration. It's about motivation. It's about challenging ourselves to show up a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. And it doesn't mean that today was a failure or a flop. It doesn't mean that anything necessarily went bad. It means that we're just taking the time to see what can we do to position ourselves in this better space to make sure that we show up our best selves, even in the worst of situations. And it's about challenging ourselves to make sure that we show up better today than we did yesterday. Again, it doesn't mean that yesterday was a failure, flop, or anything like that. It just means that we are just intentional about trying to be our best selves, again, even in the worst of situations. These are challenging times. These are trying times. These are seasons when people are just giving up and throwing in the towel. These are seasons when people become sometimes just so emotionally overwhelmed. It's a time when people are just confronted with a plethora of emotional things, baggage, and weights that they have to carry. If some of you joined my pop-up yesterday, you saw that I paid, I just came on to just talk about the memory of Stephen Boss, also known as Twitch. He was the DJ for Ellen DeGeneres. So if you didn't get a chance to catch that pop-up, then please do go to the replays and catch that. We spend this time together so that we can talk about real situations in a real world that confront that real people have to deal with. And so I enjoy having these kinds of conversations because the goal is that these conversations would make us better. These conversations will examine how we show up in other people's lives and how we allow other people to show up in our lives, particularly when we're talking about something as simple as how opinionated people can be. My goal for having that conversation, you all, is because not to get us to withhold our conversations so much, but to see how our conversations may have an impact on our ability to be clear communicators, to see how our conversations can have an impact on our ability to influence people, to see how our communication might have an impact on our ability to maintain healthy relationships. That's what this conversation is all about. It's not trying to restrict or confine us from sharing our opinions, but it's making sure that we recognize when we are overly opinionated and making sure that we recognize whenever we are in the company of people who are sometimes overly opinionated and just see, can I get some tools and a little tidbits and a little helpful hints and tips about how do I handle that kind of person? So this is a real conversation for me. It's one where I'm still sometimes challenged, I must admit, and I'm still growing in this area. I shared with you all the last time we talked that I talk all the time. And because I talk a lot in my professions, I enjoy those moments when I just don't have to talk. I enjoy those moments. I relish those moments where I can just sit and bask in my own solitude and bask in my silence. That's just the kind of person that I am. But whenever I am asked my opinion, I try to make sure I'm very tactful and strategic about how I offer my opinion because I like for it to be received certainly in the spirit that I intend to convey it. So I want to talk about that a little bit more. Yes, McDonald Davis passing was so sad. That was one of the reasons that you watched Ellen. I totally understand. So with respect to Twitch, certainly, my thoughts and prayers continue to go out to his family and friends and loved ones. But I want to shout out the LTTC VIPs, those of you who are with me and who have jumped into the chat so quickly this evening so we can continue our conversation about how to handle overly opinionated people. I want to say good evening to Annie Cutler. She says, get aboard, let's ride. MV says, hello, Cutler, and good evening, everyone. Linda Martin says, good evening, all. It's so good to see all of you. Thank you again for being with me, especially those of you who have been with me for the long haul and you've been here as we started this, what, going on 3 years now. So I want to thank you all because you have been the community that have really helped me and kept me encouraged and lifted and motivated. So I hope our dialogue is mutually beneficial. I hope it is mutually beneficial. I want to continue talking about these overly opinionated people. Tell me this, did you all run into any overly opinionated people today since our last conversation? Or did you run into a situation where you said to yourself, let me be careful about how I share my opinion. Let me know if that has happened to you since our conversation Tuesday. Have you been challenged, or did this conversation rise in your memory and you said, let me think about how I want to say this. Let me think about how I want to share my opinion, or whether or not I want to share my opinion, because we talked about it, you all. We talked about it. If you're like me, you run into people who are opinionated. You have family members, you have friends who are opinionated. Maybe you yourself are opinionated, and you just have to be careful. There's nothing wrong with having opinions. I just want to put that out there. Absolutely nothing wrong with having opinions. Oh, by the way, listen, if you're visiting, if you're visiting this channel for the first time, make sure that you go ahead and subscribe and then hit the notification bell so you'll know whenever I've gone live or uploaded new content, or just pop up like I did yesterday. But back to the subject at hand, how to handle overly opinionated people. I wanted to just establish the fact that it is important to have opinions. But if you are one of those people who think that you know everything, then your opinion might just be driving people away. Sometimes we are, and I don't mean any harm when I say this, I want to be very clear. Sometimes we are so self-focused and sometimes so not necessarily self-absorbed in a bad way, but just so focused on our status, our state, and our position, until we really are not active listeners in terms of what or how we say what we say, or how often we say what we say. But again, you have to ask yourself, am I so opinionated to the point that I'm driving people away? Do people avoid my phone calls? Are people slow in responding to my text messages or emails? Are people slow in responding to me on social media? You have to ask yourself all of that. Not that you have to become paranoid, but I want us to consider our communication. I want us to consider our communication. So one of the things that we talked about before we got into how do we handle overly opinionated people, one of the things that we talked about was, how can you tell if you are overly opinionated? Uh-oh. I hope I didn't lose anybody when I said that. But we talked about, how can you tell if you are overly opinionated, or how can I tell if I'm in the presence of somebody else who is overly opinionated? I'm just gonna hit these real fast, and I'm gonna continue our conversation about now how to handle them. But you might be overly opinionated if you talk more than everybody else. It's one thing to be a leader, but if you talk more than everybody else and you're at the center of attention all the time and the center of conversation, and you never seem to run out of things to say, you might be overly opinionated. Another way to recognize whether or not you or another person is overly opinionated, if you just can't wait to say what you have to say, even if it's not responsive to what was said. I'll just throw these out if you want to get the details of this part of the conversation. Go back and catch the replay, but I want to put this out there. Sometimes you can't wait to say what you have to say, and it's not even responsive to what someone else said. I've been in a conversation, I've been in circles and spaces where I heard one person respond, but the individual to whom they're responding said, that's not even what I said. Did you hear what I said? Let me know if you've ever been in a situation like that where you heard someone say, that's not what I said. Huh? Yeah, that's not responsive to what I asked you. You might be overly opinionated. Here's another way that you can tell whether or not you're in the space of an overly opinionated people. If that person walks and talks down a one-way street, for example, that is the kind of person who never changes his or her mind about anything. Just never changes his or her mind about anything. That may be an overly opinionated person. Let me just run through these. And then again, what if someone is closed-minded, always jumping to conclusions? They see the world the way they see it and they will never change. And because I see the way I see it and I'll never change, you can be talking to me for 2 minutes. I only heard the first 10 seconds, and that's what I'm going to respond to because I've made up my mind and I'm going to jump to conclusions because I see the world how I see it. There's no change in my mind. And I said this the last time, and you all take this nugget and share this one with people. Your mind is closed, but your mouth is open. That's what happens a lot of times to people who are closed-minded, people who jump to conclusions. Their mind is closed, but their mouth is open, when it really should be the other way. They should have a closed mouth and listening and an open mind. I'm not going to delve into that anymore, but go back and catch the replay. Here's another way you can tell if you are overly opinionated or if you're in the space or the presence of someone who is overly opinionated. Simply put, people who just know too much about too much. It's one thing to be knowledgeable and have a lot of interest and being well-rounded and being well-versed. That's one thing. But having information on every single topic under the sun, you know everything about the International Space Station, you know everything about heliophysics, you know everything about how to make lemon mousse pie, you know everything about how to change the oil on a car, you know everything about the history of the Rubik's Cube, you know, I mean, you just know everything about everything. You know too much about too much. You're probably overly opinionated. And here's the thing about people who are overly opinionated, you all. Y'all come in. I just need to whisper this one. Overly opinionated people, they can sometimes be rude. They can be forceful. Because what happens, they offer their way as their only way. There's no other way under the earth. They offer the way as the only way, the right way, the best way. And even if they don't say it, they are sometimes nasty. They're dismissive of other people's opinions, and they can be abrasive. They can be offensive. Tell me if you all know people like that. Tell me if you know overly opinionated people. Why did I just start whispering? Because a lot of times they know when they're overly opinionated. But let's empower ourselves tonight, this evening, in this conversation. Let's empower ourselves to look at the truth about how we communicate. Let's empower ourselves to look at the truth about how we share our opinions. Let's empower ourselves to look at the truth about how often, how frequently, and with what degree of force we share our opinions. There's something to be said. It's not to say that your opinion is right or wrong or good or bad, but you can be so forceful in how you share your opinions, and you share your opinions to the point of thinking that you're right. And you share your opinions to the point of making it more of a fact than an opinion. It may be my opinion that I think this is a nice sweater. That's just my opinion. But if I want to force my opinion on you and say, you know, Argyle was discovered in 1990, whenever, or 1880 or whenever, and this fabric is the kind of fabric that should be worn in this tip. Really? Cutler, really? Stop being so forceful. Stop being so forceful with what you know. Because a lot of times people will reject what you say because of how you say it. Yet you all tell me if you know I'm telling the truth. People will reject what you say because of how you say it. Yvonne Jones, I'm glad you're back too. It's good to see you. Paulo, my friend, it's good to see you. Friends call me with their problems, so I always run into this situation. This time, I thought of you and just listened. McDina, I'm telling you, sometimes you put in the situation where you're asked your opinion, and you have to be careful with how you share it. So let's talk about how do we handle overly opinionated people, and how do we handle ourselves so we don't become overly opinionated and rude and offensive. That is the goal. That's why I wanted to continue this conversation tonight, because if this is about inspiration and motivation, that's one thing. But we need to be challenged sometimes to consider what we say and how we say it. And we need to be challenged to recognize the impact that our communication has on other people. Miss Lady, thank you. It is all about respect. Absolutely. So let's talk then about how do we handle overly opinionated people. One of the things I gave you all a teaser. I offered you the first way of thinking in terms of me sharing how to handle overly opinionated people. And one of the things that I said was you got to figure out if you need to confront this behavior in the first place. You got to pick your battles. You have to decide whether or not this is the hill that you want to die on, so to speak. You have to decide whether or not you're going to wisely engage in verbal warfare. That's really what it is. Sometimes it can be verbal warfare. I didn't even characterize it like that before you all, but challenging people, sometimes it's like engaging in verbal warfare when these people cross your paths, because not every single annoying comment needs to be dealt with. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, is this worth my time or my energy? And I told you all the last time we chatted was one of the things that you can't get back. One of the things that is so valuable is your time. You can't get your time back. And so I said, you have to consider whether or not this is even worth confronting, because I had a subsequent conversation with my mom and we were talking. I said, Mom, one of the things that you've taught me is to make sure that I'm careful with what I say to whom, to certain people. And it's all about not casting your pearls before swine, making sure, and that's really not talking about them, but it's recognizing the value of what you have to say, the value of what you have to offer, the value added of your conversation, of your input. And you have to ask yourself, am I going to cast this out in this conversation? Is this something that I really need to say? Because I think what I have to say is important, and if it's going to be rejected, if it's just going to be dismissed, I'm not even going to share it. Is this a battle worth fighting? Is this verbal warfare that I really want to engage in? So figure out if you even need to confront this behavior. That's one of the first things that I can offer us in terms of how to handle overly opinionated people. I got to move on. So go back and catch the replay. And let me pick up from here. Another way to handle overly opinionated people, y'all, is to remember this. I hope this helps us all. I really, I'm just trying to help save some people's lives here and help to put us in a better position. One of the things, Envy, I'm with you. I ignore many opinionated statements made by others. I do too, because you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? But here, let's consider this one as well. Remember that a cornered animal will attack. That was just my note to myself to say a cornered animal will attack. What does that mean, what does that mean, Cutler? It means that if you're going to handle an opinionated person, you have to confront the person in private if possible. Setting environment space is so important, you all. People tend to become very defensive if they're corrected in public. Lord have mercy. I know people like that. They don't mind the correction, or yes, they do mind the correction, but they can take the correction better if it's done privately. Because if they are corrected in public, it makes the situation worse. So if you find it appropriate, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to take the person aside. Have the conversation in private. Because having the conversation in public a lot of times will just do what? Embarrass people. Having the conversation in public will do what? Sometimes it will just hurt the person's feelings. And one of the things that you want to do, Miss Lady, you said it earlier, one of the things that you want to do is maintain a respectful tone. Remember, you all, it's not always what you say, but it's how you say it. Your tone and your attitude will be so important if you really want to take the next step in addressing overly opinionated people. Can I tell you, I know so many people who have not learned that. How many of you all have heard that it's not what you say, but how you say it? I dare say most of us have heard that, but there are so many people who have heard that, but they don't put it into practice. Yeah, I've heard it's not what you say, it's how you say it. How about the way I just said that? Yeah, I've heard it's not what you say, it's how you say it. If you're going to confront overly opinionated people, you are one of the things that you want to do is to maintain a respectful tone. Make sure that you're respectful in your conversation. You don't want to sound angry. You don't want to sound sarcastic. You want to speak as softly as you can. And I'm not saying that you have to whimper and cower, but you want to be non-threatening. That's the word. You want to be non-threatening. And then if the other person becomes angry and just agitated, don't raise your voice. Don't match that negative energy. Cutler, what would you suggest? I would suggest that you remain as calm as possible. I would suggest that you restrain yourself, make sure that you make sure that you stay in control of yourself. Because the worst way to interact with an opinionated person is to become combative and domineering. Didn't I tell you all that a cornered animal will attack? So you want to make sure that you maintain some kind of control over the conversation. Don't become combative, don't become domineering. Because so many people, when they engage in conversation, you all, I've seen it over and over and over again. So many people, they engage in this one-upmanship on people. They just want to prove who knows the most or who can dominate the conversation. Can I tell you this? Nobody wins in a conversation like that. Nobody wins. Everybody walks away a loser. And my time is too important. What I have to say is too important for me to enter into a conversation and walk away as a loser. I'm just not going to enter that conversation at all. So that's another thing. In addition to making sure that you figure out whether this conversation even needs to be confronted, and you consider the fact that a cornered animal will attack. Those are two things. Here's something else, you all. You probably already know this, but I need to say it. It bears repeating. You want to deal with overly opinionated people? Become the example of what you want to hear. Become the example of what you want to hear. You cannot hold someone else to a standard that is higher than the one that you set for yourself. I might need to say that again. Think about how many overly opinionated people you've heard, or think about how many times you've been in a position where you wanted to share your opinion. Become the example of what you want to hear. You cannot hold someone else to a standard that is higher than the one that you set for yourself. Why would you say that, Cutler? For the know-it-all, make sure that you model for them that you don't know everything, and that you recognize that admitting your shortcomings is not a sign of weakness. I hope I'm helping somebody. How many times do we run into people who we look at them and they act like, they talk like, they walk like, they speak like they know every single thing under the sun? And what you really want to say to them is, shut up. You think you talk too much. You think you know everything. But be careful. Become the example of what you want to hear. I'm not saying that you have to dummy down your conversation. I'm not suggesting that you have to dumb down your knowledge. But when you don't know, just say, I don't know. It's okay with saying, I don't know, because what happens is that you model to them that it's okay to admit that you don't know. And when you become the example and you set the standards of what you want to hear and how you want to be addressed, and you're dealing with overly opinionated people, here's something that I suggest you all. Use what I call I statements instead of you statements. Even if you, Cutler, really, absolutely, even if you feel and you believe in your heart that the other person is the one causing the problems, Cutler, how do I handle that situation? Resist the temptation to sound accusatory. Even, come here a minute, y'all. Even when you know they're wrong. Even when you know, as we say in the country, when you know they're dead wrong. Resist the temptation to become accusatory. What do you mean, Cutler? Do you have any examples? Of course, y'all know I have examples. Instead of using you statements, try something like this. This is just an example. You all are forcing me to think off the top of my head. You could say something like this. You know, it seems like I've been interrupted several times now. Maybe it's just me, but that's what seems to keep taking place in this conversation. It seems like I've been interrupted several times now. That's better than what you might really want to say. You might really want to say, you're just running your mouth. You're talking all the time. You won't let me get a word in edgewise. You don't respect me. Would you just shut up for a moment, please, so I can say what I have to say? Now I listen to you. Now it's my turn. Resist the urge to do that. Just say, you know what? It feels like I keep getting interrupted. And the way to handle people like that, you all, overly opinionated people, listen twice as much as you talk. Listen twice as much as you talk. And then when you talk about how you feel in a conversation like that, the opinionated person might become a little angry, might become a little indignant. Color, how do we handle that person? Tell me this, y'all, because you know you have dealt with some opinionated people and you try to confront them. You try to say to them, thank you. I've heard you. I'd like to share this if I may. Because I seem to keep getting interrupted, but let me just say this, and I'm going to tell you about this look on my face. They will become angry. They will become indignant. And if that happens, here's what you do. Sit back and take a deep breath. Sit back and take a deep breath and make sure that you listen and not try to talk over them. And I'm going to say this because there's so many different opinions out here about this. And this is just Cutler's stance. There may be somebody else who has a completely different opinion. But if you need to walk away before a conversation escalates, there's nothing wrong with that. People would then try to intimidate you. Oh, don't just walk away. You just going to do that? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I'm not going to allow this conversation to escalate and take me to some place where I don't want to go. I'm not going to allow this conversation to escalate and cause me to be someone that I don't want to be. I'm not going to cause this conversation to escalate and allow something to come out of me that I thought was dead, that I had killed, that I had suppressed, that I had now gained control of, that I had handled. I'm not going to do that. So I'm telling you all, my friends, if you need to walk away before a conversation escalates, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with taking a break from a conversation. Now, I would suggest this, though. I would suggest that you are very respectful when you do it. Don't just walk away in mid sentence, but say, you know what, I need to take a break from this conversation because perhaps we're not getting anywhere. I need to take a break from this conversation. And then here's something else that I suggest. Stay respectful. I said this earlier. Stay respectful, even if the opinionated person is we use a lot of terms in the South, you all. Even if the opinionated person is a buffoon, a nut, a clown who knows absolutely nothing about the topic that he's spouting off, that she's talking about, treat the person like a human being. Be respectful. And one of the things that you can do in terms of being respectful is ask a lot of questions. Cutler, how do I practice being respectful when I'm talking to an idiot? How do I practice being respectful when I'm talking to a clown? Learn to ask questions. When they are so opinionated and it doesn't make sense, say to them, it doesn't seem like I'm getting my point across. Tell me this. How can I better communicate with you? Or in this moment, what do you think we both can do to improve our communication? Because we seem to keep butting heads here. So ask a lot of questions, or at least ask questions, because asking questions seems to be a signal, a sign of respect. I have to offer you all one more, you all. I have to offer you all one more before I get out of here, because you all know I'm only here for 1,800 seconds, and sometimes y'all try to keep me here more than that. But in dealing with opinionated people, Wendy, it's good to see you, my friend. In dealing with opinionated people, here's one that you have to remember. This one, you all, I know I said this channel, this YouTube channel is about inspiration and motivation, and it is about challenging. This nugget is a challenge. When we're dealing with opinionated people, one of the things that you've got to do, you all, and I know people who still struggle with this. When I say this, you all tell me, those of you who are in the chat with me, tell me if you know people who struggle in this area, or if you struggle in this area as well. One of the best ways, one of the most impactful, one of the most successful ways to deal with overly opinionated people is to fix your face. You know, I can't help but I get my facial expressions from my mother. But when you're dealing with opinionated people, you've got to fix your face. My mother's face tells the story so many times, even when she's silent. I was having a conversation with a few people the other day, and I was talking about some of the faces that my mother used to make when I was a child, when I was growing up, and some of the faces she still continues to make. One of the funniest faces she makes is the one that says, and this look says, you know, you've told that lie so many times until you start believing it yourself, haven't you? But learn to fix your face. Bite your tongue if you have to. It is okay. And smile. Remember, although I call this verbal warfare, you don't want to walk away a loser. Bite your tongue if you have to. I wish I could teach so many people that it's okay to hold your tongue. You don't have to share everything, but learn how to fix your face, bite your tongue, and smile. Why would I say that? Because in some cases, there are people who are overly opinionated, and those are people who may be in positions of authority over you. Those are people who may have what I call positional power over you. It may be your supervisor, your boss, or your manager. And you just have to be careful. It may be the state trooper who stops you. When people are in positional power, make sure that you learn how to bite your tongue when you need to and smile. Learn how to reframe your conversation away from topics that make you uncomfortable. I'm talking about fixing your face in any setting. Learn how to reframe conversations. And I will offer you one more, y'all. I'm going to offer you one more. I may have to come back and continue this. My expression shows on my face. It's hard to hide it. Paula, do I understand, my friend? It's hard for me as well. And I have to always be very aware of my facial expressions. But here is one, y'all. I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to run out of here. In terms of how to deal with overly opinionated people, you all take this one and run with it. Have an exit strategy. Have an exit strategy. Juanita, what's that you said? I have to work on that and try to smile because I don't have a good poker face. Me either. So Juanita, I've learned over the years to try to master it and just try to make sure that it's just a plain face. I have to make sure that I'm not squinting. I have to make sure that there's no furrows here. I have to make sure that I don't raise my eyebrow because people tell me my left eyebrow kind of goes up when I think I've heard something crazy. But here is the last one, you all. Listen to the others, but take this last one and run with it and share this one with people and use it. Yvonne, you said you're working on your face and your mouth. Take this one, you all, because for those of us who can't quite master working on our face, who can't work on our smile, who can't sometimes bite our tongue, take this one. Have an exit strategy. I got to get out of here. Have an exit strategy. When you're dealing with overly opinionated people who just won't shut up, who won't keep their mouth closed, make sure you have an exit strategy. If you know you're going to spend time with an opinionated person, make plans for minimizing the time that you spend in their presence. Ooh, Cutler, that's shady. Call me what you want to call me. Have an exit strategy not to spend so much time with them. Maybe in the workplace, it means avoiding the areas where you know that person is going to hang out. Make sure that you have a reply prepared so that you can excuse yourself or leave a situation. In a family gathering, plan some activities that will allow you to avoid face-to-face conversations. I'm going to end there. I'm not stopping, but I just have to end there. I'm not done. I'm not finished, but I just have to end there. I'm going to come back and revisit this conversation perhaps one more time. Tell me if these points are helping you all. Tell me if these points are helping you all to recognize overly opinionated people and are at least giving you, and these points are at least giving you something that you can put in your arsenal when you're dealing with opinionated people. I'm laughing, you all, because in terms of an exit strategy, Wendy said what you should do is text your friend to call you. Yeah, I'm trying to get out of this situation. So you're just holding your phone like this. Like, call me. Give me a call. Or say to a person, I'm going to talk with someone for about 3 minutes. Can you text me in 3 minutes? And then can you call me in 3 minutes? If they don't call you, get them when the conversation ends. All right. Listen, I want to thank you all so much for spending this time with me. I've enjoyed this topic. I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to talk about a few more points and then we'll move on to something else. But listen, let's keep maintaining connectivity. Let's keep building community. Keep your heads up. Keep your hopes up. Y'all stay safe, stay sane. Someone said to me the other day that even though people think the pandemic is over, COVID is still out there, and it is, you all. So please make sure you stay safe, stay sane. Don't let people drive you crazy. Even these overly opinionated people, because now we are empowered to handle them a little bit better. I want you to show up your best self in the worst of situations. Please know that from my heart to yours, there is and always will be so much love. I'll see you the next time. And until then, tell somebody else. Come on. Let's talk to Cutler. Good night, everybody.